I hope you're having a great Thursday. I'll just allow a couple moments for everyone to get logged on. Welcome. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to our Montessori Leadership Town Halls. We host these every single Thursday from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. on Zoom. They're always free to join. So spread the word if you have any other Montessori leaders or administrators you'd like to share these meetings with. Please feel welcome. We're also live in our Montessori Thrive Facebook group. So if you're joining us on there, you can use the comment section to ask any questions. If you're on the call, this is an open forum. So feel free to unmute yourself at any point to ask questions or share ideas. You can also utilize the chat here on Zoom if you have any questions, comments. So the way that these open forums work is it's very much just a safe space for school leaders to share their insights and experiences. So, at any moment, you're welcome to speak. You can turn your camera on or off, whatever you're comfortable with is perfectly fine. Today, we're going to be talking about onboarding and offboarding your staff, like best practices around that, what it entails, and why it's important to have a process in place for welcoming new staff, as well as, whenever they choose to leave your school community. So we'll be covering a couple of different strategies for this, how you can proceed with onboarding and offboarding, as well as sharing some resources, all of which are going to be relevant to the Montessori space. Just a quick overview of what we're going to be covering today. We'll talk briefly about what is onboarding, why it's important to make your staff feel welcome, introducing Montessori to new staff, because we don't always hire trained staff, or not all of our staff is necessarily trained in Montessori. Introducing your culture, so what's unique to your Montessori community. What happens after onboarding? So what's the next step into getting them used to your community, checking in with them. And then we'll also talk about offboarding. So what happens after someone decides to leave your community, parting on good terms and getting feedback so that you can improve your processes. And then we'll have time for some Q&A and discussion. So it's hopefully going to be a shorter topic, so it might not take up the full hour, but we're here for the full hour. So if the conversation keeps going and you guys want to stay and talk more about the topic, we know we can stay on and talk as much as you all need to. So first and foremost, as this is an open forum, I'd love for everyone to introduce themselves and why you joined today's meeting. You can do so on the chat or you can unmute yourself. Let's get to know one another. This is an open forum again, so collaboration is welcome. So I'll just allow a couple moments for everyone to introduce themselves. You can share where you're joining us from and why you joined today's call. Beth from Crystal Lake, welcome. Matt joining from Schoolhouse Montessori Academy. Welcome, Matt. And Ashley from Greensboro Montessori. And Beth says, we'll be hiring lots of new staff next year. Okay. So lots of onboarding processes then. Elizabeth Pritchley, welcome back, Elizabeth. It's always a pleasure to see you at these town halls. And Patricia from our own team, awesome. Rachel, Montessori School of Louisville. As an admin team in our meeting the other day, we came across the realization that we spend more money on prospective parent tours than we do on our own staff. That's sad in some ways. It'd be challenging. It's an investment to, dedicate some time in creating great staffing processes in your school. And I think with changing times as well, expectations are shifting a lot around staffing. All right. Well, we're going to start with the onboarding process. It's always a lot of work whenever you hire new staff. It's the recruiting process is stressful. And if you want to learn more about the recruiting process, we did a town hall earlier this year on recruiting in the Montessori space. That recording is available on our YouTube channel. I'll add the link to that recording in the chat later if you guys are interested in learning more about recruiting and the hiring process. But what comes after that is also just as important, because good onboarding is really valuable in your staffing and hiring process. So what is onboarding and why is it important? Onboarding is really the process that comes after you hire someone. It's important because it helps new employees acclimate to the new work environment, integrate to the company culture, in this case, your Montessori school culture, your mission, your vision, and become effective contributors. A good onboarding experience shows employees that their workplace will be supportive, as well as one that encourages professional development. It's important to have an onboarding process because ultimately you want all of your staff members to feel like they gained that support and confidence initially when they come into a new space, especially when working with people who may have early childhood experience, but maybe not specific to the Montessori space. It's going to be important to do some hand-holding and to really make them feel comfortable in our classrooms. So let's talk about making them feel welcome. This is really a huge part of onboarding and the core of what it's all about. You already finished hiring them. You shook their hand. You agreed, on hours, on how much they're getting paid, and they've agreed to join your team. So a couple of things to do maybe that you want to consider early on is having something like a new hire document checklist. Another resource that could be helpful is to have a new hire, fill out a goal setting document. This will come later on, but this is something that you can consider implementing into your onboarding process. Another thing to consider is observation for us in Montessori. That's really important, especially for staff that might not have background in Montessori. The school that I worked at, we oftentimes hired classroom assistants that may have had a great experience in early childhood, working in daycares or other preschools, but they didn't have specific Montessori experience. That doesn't make them bad candidates for the job. It just means they're going to need a little bit of hand-holding when it comes to getting acclimated to a Montessori environment. Also introducing them to staff and making them feel welcome. Ultimately, you want to have a workplace that feels like a community. Whenever you hire someone and they feel like, they got to know everyone got to meet them, it just eases that transition for them and makes it a little bit less daunting, makes them feel more comfortable asking questions and asking for help early on. So oftentimes you want people to be asking those questions early on, because when it gets too late, maybe they become a little bit shyer to ask those important questions. So checking in with people, making sure you're introducing your team to them from the very start is really important and crucial to making sure that they're thriving from the start. Letting them also know where they can go if they need support, whether that's yourself as the administrator, whether it's if they're an assistant, a lead guide, if they're a guide, somebody else, maybe you have someone who can mentor them. Let's see here, Denise. Hi, we've established a school that expanded in a second location. We've done an incredible amount of hiring and do not have a deep Montessori pool, a very high cost of living. Okay. Thank you, Denise. That gives me a good idea. Okay, so I think a lot of people are looking at hiring then. It's tough as well because a couple weeks ago, as I mentioned, we had the town hall on recruiting. And it's challenging, especially when you have limited budget for hiring and there are so many competitive people are really looking for competitive salaries. So I recommend looking at that town hall as well if you're looking on hiring a lot more staff. And then what was I on? I also think it's important to walk them through the employee handbook. I know everyone is probably handing out employee handbooks when they hire someone new, but to take some time, maybe have a one-on-one meeting to go through the really important points verbally face-to-face, because that really helps highlight what is important and what you value as a school, and what are your non-negotiables, what are your expectations, etc. Any questions, just like easing into onboarding? As I said, you can drop any questions in the chat or unmute yourself. This is just a sample of a checklist, of a new hire checklist, everything that you might have to go through someone once you hire them. It's good to have a checklist that you can sign off and you can put a date as to which everything is done. Obviously, every school will have different processes, different requirements. This is just a sample one. This one, as well as other staffing documents, are all available on Montessori Thrive. We have quite an extensive collection that can help you with the onboarding process. So if you're a Montessori Thrive member, you can always go in, download this document along with a sample employee handbook and much more. But having this where someone's required to sign off really ensures that everything was done properly, everything was handed over in a timely manner, and the person just can have that assurance. So what about the staff that does not have Montessori experience? So this refers to if you're hiring maybe an assistant or maybe even office staff that doesn't know that much about Montessori, but they've worked in early childhood, or maybe they just don't have any experience at all. You want to make sure to introduce them a little bit into the Montessori world as part of that onboarding process. This means that some training will be required. It doesn't have to be necessarily official training by AMI or AMS or a specific course if that's not something that you can manage at your school. But you yourself as an administrator or your administration team can provide a variety of resources and, more informal or generalized training to make sure that that person feels that they really have a little bit of a foundation or introduction to what you're all about. Obviously, that should be part of your mission, and hopefully the person that you hire did at least a little bit of research into Montessori before applying to a Montessori job and getting hired, but it's great whenever you offer those resources early on. So what I mean by offering training and resources, things like an assistant guidebook. So as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes I see in the Montessori space, we hire those, we hire trained lead guides, but maybe the assistants are not necessarily AMI, AMS, or any other kind of Montessori trained. They don't necessarily need to be to work in a Montessori classroom. So having an assistant guidebook or a training guide that just highlights everything that they would need to know, the basics of Montessori, what their role is in the classroom as an assistant in a Montessori classroom, because that might look different than being an assistant in a daycare or in a different setting or in a Waldorf school. It might not look the same. Also a list of book recommendations. There's so many books that just kind of outline the basics of Montessori in a way that's very consumable, short, a couple, maybe 200 pages. I'm sure we have a list on Montessori Thrive of different book recommendations that are helpful. Shadowing. So maybe, this person that you hired is going to be shadowing someone for a few weeks before they're able to work independently in the classroom. Obviously, this is not always the case because sometimes we have people who leave without warning, or we don't have enough staff for somebody to be shadowing someone else, but it's always helpful. Observation periods. I know that this was a thing when I worked at a Montessori school where all of the assistants that we hired that didn't have Montessori experience would come in for an observation. Even the office staff is helpful, just so that they know, this is what goes on in the classrooms, this is how it works. And observation and just being able to be aware of what the children are doing day to day is a huge part of being a Montessori educator, whether you're a guide, an assistant. It's important to understand observation. Also, I recommend giving them an observation guide if they're completely new to observing in a Montessori classroom and they don't know what to look out for. So you can give them a little summary, here are the things to look out for, listen for this type of language. How does the lead guide respond when this happens? And that allow them that time to take notes so that they're not only just observing, but they know what they're looking out for, because they may not know if they don't necessarily have Montessori experience. Offering check-ins throughout the onboarding process. So, if they're doing a trial period or if they're coming in and just doing some shadowing, checking in, once a day, maybe for that first week to see if they have any questions. Because again, people are more likely to ask questions earlier on. It almost becomes a little bit, people hesitate more. And, say they've been working at a place for 3 months. That's when they're like, I probably should have asked that question weeks ago. So it would be weird if I asked now. So having those check-ins, you give them the confidence and reassurance that they can ask that early on or whenever. And then it's great to have resources on daycare versus Montessori. We have resources on this in Montessori Thrive, but we found this incredibly helpful in our school to kind of help new hires who didn't have experience in Montessori understand the unique differences of how the classroom operated differently in a Montessori setting versus a daycare setting, or a public school setting. So we found this to be helpful to just kind of introduce them. Any questions or comments? Does anyone else have any recommendations for, offering resources for people who might be new hires and don't have Montessori experience? Is this a common occurrence that people are hiring maybe assistants or staff who are new to Montessori? Yes, I see some nods here in the chat. Is there a sample observation guide? Yes, so we have a sample observation guide on Montessori Thrive. So if you're a Nido Marketing client or a Montessori Thrive member, there's that in the collection. I'll link it at the end of the talk, so it's a Word document, so you can download it and edit as needed. It's designed for parent observations, but it works just the same. It just highlights, what a person who comes into the classroom should look out for. I'll share the link to that later. Here's just a sample of a little table of contents or a structure for a Montessori assistant guide or training guide, just things that you might want to cover for somebody who doesn't have Montessori experience. This can be in addition to an employee handbook. So obviously you'd have the employee handbook that outlines the expectations of the workplace, their role, etc. And then this can be in addition to that. I see here we offer trainings for assistants, for example, via Trillium, and that is a 15 credit assistant course, and that's great. And offering that formal training can always be an option as well, and that way you yourself don't have to do it. But if that's not something that your school can access, having these resources available is also an option. I know we did both at our schools. We did both formal and we also did informal, because I know a lot of the times as well, when you offer that formal training, you want some sort of commitment in exchange because you're investing in that hire. By the way, we have a resource for that as well in Montessori Thrive. So if you need a commitment contract for any staff that you're providing paid training for, and you want to make sure that we're providing this training, so we at least 1 year of your employment, we have contract samples for that on Thrive. But yes, this is just a sample of a training guide. Again, I think some things that might be important to include in that are things that regard to Montessori philosophy, how Montessori views child development, so covering things like sensitive periods and planes of development. Again, somebody who's new to Montessori may not really be aware of that quite yet. Positive discipline, I think this is huge. How do we speak to children? What kind of language do we use? How do we react in certain situations? I think that's a big one. Again, observation, preparing the environment, especially if their assistants are going to be doing a lot of environment preparation. So it's important they understand, how the classroom is set up, materials and shelves, as well as routines, especially if they're working with the younger children, how important routine is, and keeping on top of those routines day to day. Again, the story is a little bit different when you're hiring trained guides. So if you're hiring somebody that is maybe AMI or AMS certified or has a lot of background in Montessori, the focus might not be as much in offering those types of resources. They already know very well how Montessori works. They may have worked at other Montessori schools. Then the shift in the onboarding process is going to be more on, the focus on it is going to be more on just getting them acclimated to your community. So every Montessori school is unique. We have a unique mission. We have unique expectations in the workplace. We have unique schedules. So it's important to make those expectations clear. What usually can be helpful is to schedule out a first day, have everything in writing hour by hour, how it's going to work when they start on the first day. You can say, park your car here, come into my office. We're going to spend, an hour having an introductory meeting. And then I'm going to pair you up with, one of our lead guides who you will shadow throughout the day and observe. And you can give them that document of a breakdown of hour by hour for that first day. I think it's great as well, if you can, to offer a complimentary lunch or breakfast where you just have a casual conversation about, this is, in our community, we're very open about this. We have an open door policy, or if there's a problem, this is how we address it, and you can have it in a comfortable way and provide them lunch or breakfast. Also, it's great to have an opportunity for them to meet the team and share a little bit about themselves. So whether this is, maybe you pull them in the morning to the workspace, or there's a teacher's lounge of sorts in here, or we had a workroom in our school, where there was a coffee machine, and you say, hello, this is our new hire. I want you to say hello to everyone, give them a chance to introduce themselves, and just learn a little bit more about everyone working at the school. Giving them a formal tour of the classrooms and any other workspaces that they'll be accessing day to day. And then covering workplace ethics and mission community culture. This is, I touched upon going over the employee handbook face-to-face. This would be covered during that time ideally, but I think it's very important to cover workplace ethics early on, so you can manage the expectations to avoid any problems in the future. Any questions, comments? So this is just going to be I'm going to go through a simple example of an onboarding process. It's a 5-step process. Again, every school will have a unique onboarding process. Some schools have moved greatly online for this. Some people still do it the old-fashioned way, where it's all starts as soon as that person comes through the door on their first day. But this is just an example. You can take it, you can edit it, you can make it your own. So step 1 is the pre-arrival prep. So this is what you're doing before that person starts their first day. Number 1, prepare any necessary paperwork, such as contracts and documents, in advance. This is important because you want to make sure all of that is submitted before they come, or ready for them to sign on that first day, so that you can go ahead and process those documents. Also, things like background checks, any sort of thing like that, you want to make sure that's done before. Assign a designated staff member to oversee the onboarding process, whether that's yourself as the administrator, or maybe a lead guide, somebody who's going to be leading the person through that first day that you would have scheduled out. Any uniforms that you might be giving this staff member, if you have uniforms at your school, and things like admin prep. So giving them an email if that's something that they will have at your school, any type of passwords that they would need. They'll have a locker to store their things throughout the day. You would prep all of that before they come in so that it's ready for them. Step 2 is the welcome package. And this is where you're really just, handing them everything on the first day. So creating a welcome package that includes the essential information about the school, your mission, policies. This could be the employee handbook, with a couple of additional things, such as maybe the assistant training guide if they're not familiar with Montessori, or anything that you would feel would be beneficial to this person. I think it works really well when you have an individualized welcome package, because obviously every staff member that you're hiring is going to take a different role at your school. So consider what they will need to know for that role. I know that's a lot for people who are looking to hire a lot of staff, but it's worth, taking the time to put together those resources for each individual person. You want to provide, again, that detailed job description and expectations for that new staff member. Obviously, you would have gone through this in the interview process, but it's always great to revisit that and say, just a reminder, this is what's expected of you, and this is why it's important that it's clear, this is a school. We need people who are reliable. The consistency is really important for the children. So covering that early on can be really helpful. Also include any necessary forms such as emergency contact information, tax forms, and background check consent, things that they might need to fill out on the first day. This can be part of the new hire checklist. You can also hand that out in the welcome package just so that they can start getting those signatures and making sure that everything that they need to do is submitted. Step 3 will be orientation. So this is, after they walk through the door, you've given them the welcome package, what happens next on that first day or first week? Conduct an orientation session to introduce new staff member to the school's culture, philosophy, and policies. This is what I mentioned earlier about maybe you can do this over lunch or breakfast. Provide an overview of the Montessori approach and methodology. You can do this. You would have handed them the welcome package. You can say, I really need you to read these pages. This is really important if just for you to gain some more understanding about how Montessori works, how our classrooms run and operate, and our approach to education. And this is where you would then introduce the new staff to key personnel, administrators, fellow teachers, and support staff so they know where they need to go for what. And you'll be familiarizing the new staff member with the physical layout of the school. This is the tour that you're showing them, every workplace that they'll engage with, where they can park their car, where they need to go if they have a locker, where they can keep their things, if they want to have a cup of coffee, if they need to restock on materials, etc. Step 4, you'll talk a little bit about training and professional development. This is a huge part of what we do because we know that we want all of our staff to thrive and become better educators year upon year. So it's nice to provide some comprehensive training on Montessori principles, curriculum, and classroom management techniques. Of course, if we're hiring AMI and AMS trained guides, they already have this experience. If not, we can always offer it formally or informally. Again, with that shadowing and observation. So you can say to somebody that you've hired who maybe doesn't have Montessori experience, you can say, this is how we're going to introduce you to how our school operates, how our day-to-day works, and our approach to education. And if they already have that experience, then maybe more just how does the schedule work in our unique school. You can talk about how you offer opportunities for ongoing professional development. So for instance, maybe you are required to offer a refresher course once a year, once every other year. And so you talk about that, and that's something that your school offers. Or maybe you hired somebody and have agreed to help them pay for training in exchange for an employment agreement. And this is also a great time to assign a mentor or experienced staff member to guide and support that new staff member during their initial period, whether that's a week, a month, 3 months. You decide what that person might need or what you think would be the best fit. And finally is the follow-up. And I think this is the part where this is the part that people usually forget to do, because we think, oh, we've done everything. They're getting used to the school, but it's important to check in and follow up to see how this new hire is actually doing. And this is where it really helps prevent any further turnover. So what we want to avoid is having people who don't have enough support, are really intimidated, are a little bit confused. They might have had experience with early childhood, but they don't feel supported in your environment. So this is where, you need to be regularly checking in. So encouraging collaboration and teamwork among staff members is important. Facilitating those opportunities for new staff members to observe experienced teachers. This is really crucial. And also participate in team meetings and provide those regular check-ins, especially for a new hire. Perhaps a good idea would be something like a monthly meeting during the first 3 months. So once a month. I'm sorry, there's fireworks outside my house, so you can't hear that. It's evening where I'm at, so sorry about that. So yeah, for the first 3 months, maybe you have a monthly check-in where you check in with that new hire one-on-one and see, do you have any questions? Have you met any goals on the new hire goal chart that we've set? Do you feel like you're getting used to the classroom? Are you having any challenges that you need support in? And maybe that will help them really feel more comfortable in your environment. So what do you do to welcome new hires? I'd love to hear any ideas that have been helpful in your own communities. You guys are on the grounds right now, hiring and doing this process. So what has been helpful in your community? Has anyone implemented any of these? I see here Shannon says we send welcome emails that include all staff and divide orientation with all admin. That's great. Also, something I missed is introducing that new staff member to your parent community as well. So maybe you do a social media post, or in your newsletter you include, welcome our new team member. This is going to be the lead guide for this age group, or whatever, and do a little brief introduction and share a fun fact about them. That could be something you could do as well. Matt says, we have our staff orientation before first day of work so they know the area and staff before starting.
I was going to add on to that too. Similarly, at our school, because we're on an academic year, like most of the new staff is all starting at the same time, kind of coming back for the new year. So having like a half a day or even a full day before school starts for all the staff, current and new, to just kind of have a fun day, and just maybe it's going for a hike or just doing something social where it's really just kind of to get to know each other. I think that really helps the new staff feel like they're welcomed and part of the community.
Absolutely. I see here in the chat, Denise says, we have an onboarding process that includes orientation of building, classroom, and school orientation. We also are using new this year an HRIS system for onboarding documents. And there are plenty of, HR systems that you can use that will help you with a guided onboarding process if you're really looking for, something that will help with that. All right, let's talk about offboarding. This is, it's always a little bit tricky to offboard someone. And unfortunately, we can't always leave on great terms with everyone who decides to leave our community. Hopefully that's the case. But I think it's important to have a system in place to make those transitional periods a little bit easier. So why is offboarding so important? Well, offboarding is the process that leads to the formal separation between employee and company. So teacher, assistant, and employee at your school through resignation, termination, or retirement. It encompasses all the decisions and processes that take place when an employee leaves. This might include transferring that employee's job responsibilities. So this is why it can be stressful. We already have so much on our plate. And whenever somebody, who are used to being there every day is deciding to leave, it's difficult to not only do the whole recruiting process and hiring process, and now we have to also transfer all of those responsibilities. And it might take time for them to get on the same level of comfort and, expertise as the person who departed from your team. So the benefits of offboarding, well, when you create a really healthy workplace, people are more likely to leave on good terms. This is not always the case. I know everyone puts so much effort into creating a healthy workspace. We don't live in a perfect world, and not everyone's going to be a perfect fit, but it's always good to have practices in place to make that transition easier. I think something that's really important for schools to do is to require a notice period. Whether people respect that or not ultimately is more up to them. But I think by making that a requirement in your contract or really discussing this early on is important. You can explain that this is because it's essential you have time to find a replacement. Children need consistency. And while, obviously there might be cases where somebody has to suddenly leave, maybe for personal matters, maybe they have to suddenly move. If they are able to give a notice period, you can decide whether that's 2 weeks, whether it's a month, but for them to give you a heads up and that you'll greatly appreciate any type of notice period. Have a process for termination, resignation, or retirement. It's always nice to check in on your staff, maybe a certain way through the year, say, are you planning on returning next year? If not, that's okay. We just want to know because it takes so long nowadays to maybe find a trained guide in our area. So it helps us, ease the transition so much more if we have the heads up. You can ask this months before the year wraps up. So yes, having a process for all of that really helps as well. See if the person who is leaving is willing to help with a new hire if you feel that this would be helpful for the staffing process. Usually these might be people who are, retiring or have known for a long time that they might have to move for any reason. And this will be really helpful to ease just that transition period, because that person might even be able to shadow this person who's leaving your community and really learn how they operate. And that will almost be like there was no turbulence whatsoever because they learned directly from that person how to operate. So all of these things can be helpful. So I'm just going to do just like I did with the onboarding process, just a brief couple steps on how you can do an offboarding process. And again, every school is different and unique, and everyone will have a different offboarding process. So you need to find one that is realistic and works for your school. But something I think always helps is an exit interview. Again, not everyone might be willing to give an exit interview, but I think it's helpful. You can use this interview to gather feedback from the departing staff member. You can discuss their reasons for leaving and any suggestions for improvement. So maybe they're leaving because they had a problem with your community, or maybe they're leaving because they had personal problems, but getting that feedback might give you an opportunity to address some of those problems or correct anything that might need to be corrected. You can also use this feedback to enhance the school's practices and address any concerns. So for instance, if you're, talking to someone in an exit interview and they felt that the community or the workplace was not supportive, you can ask them why. You can take notes and you can see if anything can be addressed. Maybe their problems were not so much with other staff, but maybe with the way that you communicated with your families and that created stress. Maybe it was burnout. So maybe you can implement some things to prevent burnout or provide things like mental health days. So what they have to say can have a lot of value in how you later retain staff down the line. So it's always helpful to have an employee exit interview because you learn a lot more about your workplace when somebody leaves it than when somebody joins it. So it's just a good opportunity for you to make improvements. Here's just a couple of example questions that you can ask during an exit interview. So things like, what led you to your decision to leave? What do we do well as a company? What do we thrive at as a school? Do we have a great parent community? Are we great with routines? Are we organized? So you can even ask some follow-up questions to that broader question. What do we need to do to improve? Did you feel supported by, whether it was your lead guide or your administration? Did you feel you had that support? Do you feel you received proper training and development opportunities? So did you feel like you got enough background on Montessori if you didn't know about it before? What are you looking for your next job opportunity? So maybe this person left to go to another school, is there a particular reason why? Was it strictly because of pay? Was it because of flexible hours? Again, that could give you some insights as to what people really value from their workplace. And what would make you reconsider your decision to leave? This is just a good one, because this is what's really going to say, oh, well, maybe if the school had done this differently, I would have stayed. And that's something that you can consider whether you want to take action on or not, or whether you think is worth actually improving or not. You and your team can decide that. There's a variety of questions that you can ask, but these are just some ideas. Step 2, transition planning. So this is the stressful part. This is where hopefully you're in a place where you can collaborate with a departing staff member and create a transition plan. So again, you're just going to re-identify all of the key responsibilities that this person needs that will be transferred to the new hire. And you can help, you can hopefully have their help in ensuring a smooth handover of duties and providing necessary training to that staff member taking over their responsibilities. It's great to have them, write a little day-to-day, this is what I do every day. These are the things that, I prepare the materials like this, or this is where I keep everything and how I keep it organized for the lead guide, or this is how I tell my assistant to do this, etc. So you can have them hopefully, I don't know, write a little bit of information for that new hire. Again, not everybody will be willing to do this. Ultimately, it might be best to just have a list of everything that person is responsible from the beginning and have that in your own file. But it's always more helpful when it comes from the person who is leaving to the person who will be taking over. Number 3, if possible, farewell and appreciation is always nice. I think this just builds community and it shows that you really valued everything that person did for you. I think it's great to organize a farewell gathering or event to acknowledge that someone's departing. Again, not everyone departs on good terms, but if they do, this is always something nice to do. Vicky says that. Thank you for joining us, Vicky. Another thing, just express gratitude, and you can provide a token of appreciation or a personalized thank you note. It's always great to have a thank you card and have everyone in the office sign it. If we wish you the best on your move or on this next chapter, we've really appreciated your time. And if you can, maintain positive relationships with former staff members. Some people leave because they wanted flexibility, but maybe they might be willing to come back as a substitute for your school. So it's always great if you feel that person really thrived in your community and they're leaving for personal reasons or just because the scheduling didn't work out for them. It's always great to leave the door open and say, you're always welcome in our community. If you ever need anything from us, if you need a recommendation, please don't hesitate to reach out. All of these things just ensure that everything goes so much smoother. So, it's important to make all of your staff members feel appreciated. Is there anything else that someone does in their school community for appreciation when somebody leaves? Things like retirement parties as well, things like that. Especially when it's staff who's been at your school for 10, 15, 20 years. These are people who have, given so much. Step 4, this is more of the boring part, but it's important, is the documentation and record keeping. Again, collect any school property that this person might have, such as keys, access cards. If you need to change any passwords, all of this needs to be done. Update personnel records and ensure all necessary paperwork is completed, such as termination forms and final paychecks, just to make sure that that transition is closed and you can move forward. And then step 5 is find opportunities for improvement. So this is where you would maybe assess everything that person said during the exit interview. Maybe if there's something that you're seeing repeated a lot when people leave, that's something that you can choose to address. If it's something that you can address at your school, you can take on that feedback and see how you can reduce that turnover in the future. And yeah, you can revise those procedures. If someone's complaining they didn't get enough support in the beginning, you can add things to your onboarding process, or you can update your offboarding process. So those things can be helpful. I'd love to know, what do you do to ease the offboarding and transitional period? I know that's not always a pleasant period. It can be challenging to find a replacement nowadays. I'm not sure. It used to be really hard to find trained staff. I'm not sure if it's still really difficult nowadays. I know it is in some communities. And also, if you've ever dealt with a difficult departure, how did you manage that and how would you do that differently? Sharing advice on that is always helpful. Even though it's unpleasant to talk about, it can help someone else if that comes along. I see here in the chat. Yeah, it's difficult to find trained staff. We need more transitional documents. Do you have templates for that, especially for lead guides? You know what? I don't think we have, a great resource to add to Montessori Thrive will be an exit interview for Montessori. So we can always add that to our collection. I'm not sure, Denise, if you're a Montessori Thrive member, but if you're not, but if you are, I highly recommend going to the staffing section of our resources. I'll link that in the chat once I stop sharing my slides. But we have a couple of documents that can help with these processes and also in our operations section. Shannon says here, send an email in our weekly staff update, email thanking them for their time and hard work, ensuring everyone has time to say goodbye. Absolutely. And also maybe you have a parent committee who wants to come together and give a guide who's been at your school for so many years a gift, and you can inform them, look, our guide is leaving. We're working together as a school to give them a gift if any of you parents would like to contribute. So they're not just leaving you, they're leaving families as well. And that's, it's always a little bit sad when someone leaves. All right, so these are the links that I was mentioning, and I'll link them actually in the chat. But we have resources for staffing, operations, and also you can always request a resource. So if you have something in mind that you would like, please place a request. It really helps when you're on the more specific side of what you're looking for, because that gives us more insight as to how to create the document. Because when someone places a request on Montessori Thrive, what we do is we first ask other schools if they have that resource already in their community. If they do, some will be willing to contribute it and we'll upload it to our collection. If they don't, we'll create it ourselves and add it to the collection. So the more details or specific you can be when requesting, it really helps us make sure the document is actually going to be helpful to you. So you can always submit a request for a resource. So it can usually we give about a week for somebody to contribute it, and if nobody has contributed to the resource within that first week, we'll try to build that out within the next week or two so that we can get it uploaded to the collection. And also we have our private leadership forum. So if you want to ask other school leaders questions in a place where no parent is going to see it, you can ask in our forum on Montessori Thrive. So if you have a question on hiring, if you have a question on how to offboard, or if you want to ask a question about a resource, you can always ask in our private forum. I want to go ahead and stop sharing my screen for just some general Q&A. But before we do that, we're planning some future Montessori town halls, and we'd love to know what you'd like to see at a future town halls, because we plan these around what you guys need. They're very much, open for suggestion. So if you're facing any challenges in your school community, if you need any support as a school leader, if there's a consultant that you've worked with or that you think would be great to speak at one of our town halls, or that you'd like to hear from, we reach out to consultants, and many of them have come and shared their expertise in a presentation with us at these town halls in the past. So let us know. And if you yourself would like to lead a future meeting, if you have some advice to share other school leaders, you can also let us know. So please, if you have any suggestions for topics, feel free to drop them in the chat. So if there's something troubling you, maybe it's conflicts with families, maybe it's growing your enrollment, maybe it's marketing, that's our expertise, where our expertise lies. And we can host a town hall that can help address those challenges. All right, I'll stop sharing and I'll link those links in the actual chat so that you can click on them. Are there any other questions, comments? Feel free to unmute yourself or ask in the chat before we wrap up. We've technically got 9 minutes, so if you guys want to wrap up early, we won't keep you, but your opportunity here. I'm just gonna link here. So this is a link in our Montessori Thrive for staffing resources, and then operations. And then we also have, if you ever want to request a resource, we really welcome requests because it helps us grow our collection. So please do not hesitate to request a resource. There.
Yeah, I was also going to just say that if you're not a member of Thrive, there is a 2-week free trial. So if you want to just join and check it out, and if you don't want to continue, you can just cancel it and you won't be charged anything. So you can go see some of the resources that we have and take advantage of them without having to pay anything for it initially.
Absolutely. And here's the observation guide as well. It's a parent observation guide, but it really works for somebody who doesn't know how to observe in a Montessori classroom, and it helps them guide. So you can definitely use that for somebody who you've taken on and you want them to notice certain things in the classroom. But yeah, definitely take some time to explore our collection. And like I said, we welcome requests. So, and if anyone has any, maybe you might not think of anything now, but if you have any ideas for future town halls, or if you need help with something, these town halls are a space to provide resources and discuss those topics. So feel free to reach out to me on via email. I organize these town halls every week. So if there's a topic you ever want to see, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I will look to planning something around that topic. All right. Well, I believe most places have tomorrow off, correct? Veterans Day. So this is technically Friday. So I hope if there's no more questions, I'll pause once more for questions. Thank you so much for joining and enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your long weekend. And we hope to see you at future town halls. Like I said, they're always free to join every Thursday from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.